I'm Erik Newton, and this is The Together Show. We all know relationships take work, but what is that work, and how do we do it? As a former divorce lawyer, I've watched thousands of couples break up firsthand. Having seen the worst in relationships, I decided to try to help couples stay together. So on this show, we talk to real couples and find out what love really looks like.
We're going to create this together. We don't know how we're going to do it. We don't have a history that shows us how to do it, but we're going to do this together. And co-creating it was pretty neat. And at the same time, we don't know if it's going to happen or not.
Welcome to the first episode, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. As of the recording of this intro, we have 42 interviews locked with amazing couples, and it has been an absolute labor of love. I have never enjoyed a process as much as I do this. Now, I have to admit, it did take us a moment to figure out which couple we should have in our first episode. But once we thought of Hans and Desiree Phillips, it was really a no-brainer. And that's because the purpose of this podcast, of course, is to explore the truth about relationships, to go below the PR and all the social media fluff that's out there, to get down to what it really takes to make a relationship work for the long term. Hans and Desiree exemplify what it means to work for a relationship. These two have been together for 27 years. They've been through ups and downs and middles and back agains. They've been through it all. And on top of that, they flat out floored me halfway through this interview. Now, I won't give away the surprise, but the bomb that Hans dropped so casually happens about, as I said, halfway through the show. So with that, let's go to Hans and Desiree Phillips. So, I don't know how the two of you met. And I know you've been together for a long time, but I don't know how you met. So fill us in.
I think Hans should give the short version because we could spend a whole hour on how we met.
The short version. Neither one of us were drinking, but we were at a bar, and it was a friend of ours who was the DJ, so we went there to dance. Desiree came in. I saw her at the top of the stairs. The music swelled. The lighting was perfect. And my thought was, who's that? She bent over and said hi to the DJ, which was right next to the stairs. I was like, bingo, there's my opportunity. I walked over afterwards, chatted her up for a minute, the DJ, and said, who was that you were talking to? I think I know her. Oh, that's Desiree. Right, Desiree. Yes, that is her.
That was sneaky
and
awesome.
Yes. So went up to her and asked her to dance, and we danced 3 dances and got completely depressed after that third dance because I was really clear. This woman has to be in a relationship, a long-term committed relationship. And sure enough, she was. Invited the DJ, Shantae, to my birthday party a year later. She surprised me by bringing Desiree.
The DJ knew you had a flame for her?
No.
It was just a total coincidence?
Yep.
Oh, wow.
I got lucky.
That's nice.
It was.
Okay.
So she walks in, and she's fabulous, and I have my friends and family around me, but she laughs really loud at everything that's even mildly amusing that I'm saying. And so as a guy, I'm like, this
she
chick
really
likes me. Exactly. But 3 months of dating later, I realized she laughs really loud at everything. So I invite her out. It's really tough to ask her out. Like, she's just busy, and she couldn't care less about me, which is unusual because I was really working on being devastatingly charming and attractive. So large slice of humble pie later, we go on this horrible double date. My friend Christopher and I and her friend Carrie and her, and it is just a nightmare of epic proportions.
How could it be such a nightmare?
Well, first of all, I had plans that night to go to a woman's party with my girlfriend, and we were squeezing this into a schedule to make it work for both of us. And
we didn't do squeezing in, me or Christopher. We didn't get squeezed in.
No, you guys are you're the guys.
That's right. 6-part dates, each part better than the last. Your mind is blown.
So when we got to him, first of all, we were running late. I did call to let him know we were running late, but we pretty much had so much fun before we even got to him that I think that was definitely not what he was looking for, or his friend.
They wanted to be the center of your attention in every way.
Let the escapade begin.
Yeah.
So we went on this date, and a couple of parts in, they were like, we're tired, take us home. Christopher glances at his watch. Hey, the night's just getting started at the bars. Perfect for me. See you guys later. And I literally peeled out. In my 1965 Volvo, as I dropped them off, I peeled out to let them know my displeasure.
In
And
a
we-
Volvo.
In a
That
Volvo. It was hard to do.
takes
It was hard to do.
something.
And we're at the front door as he's peeling out, and both she and I said, what a jerk. He needs to get a life.
That's so great.
So the next
I
morning,
love
she
this.
wakes up and she runs through the night.
But I do have to say, before you say that, there's about 3 times in our relationship to each other that if one of us had not made a phone call, no Hans, no Desiree. So this is the first phone call that happened.
Oh, okay.
So
So,
she
one of the
she-
first of 3 critical calls.
Yeah,
Right.
she reviews the night and she's like, maybe you should call and say I'm sorry. Because at that morning when I woke up, I was like, Desiree, who? So she calls me up and apologizes. And so I'm thinking, okay, well, I went highbrow. Let's go lowbrow. I'll take you to the flea market. So the next weekend we go to the flea market. I buy her a balloon. She ties it around her wrist. I take her hand. Everything's going great. She lets me take her hand, take her back to my place afterwards and make her brunch, a lovely brunch on the veranda.
Nice and well thought out.
Okay, I didn't have a veranda, but if you squinted, it was veranda-esque. And then after the brunch, I leaned in and kissed her, and she said, why did you do that? And I said, I've been wanting to kiss you since the first moment I laid eyes on you. And she said, aren't you gay?
I thought you were
Did
gay.
not.
I did.
The whole time.
I did. I thought he wanted to be my
A year and a
new
half.
gay friend because I was going to be really excited about that. Let me tell you why.
It was the 80s.
It was the 80s.
I am so surprised. I did not see that coming.
First of all, he was tall, handsome, gorgeous, in touch with his feelings, able to communicate.
But a total jerk on the
Very
first date.
self-expressed. Well, that was when I first met him on the dance floor. I was going back in my memory bank. And so back the very first time I met him, he had all these qualities that I thought were really cool. And most gay guys have those qualities.
And my strategy was make you wonder if I'm gay and then let you know that I'm not. Like that, just draw him in with, hey, he's gay. He's my new friend. And then, but
No,
I was
you're saying tongue in cheek, or was that actually?
no, I was literally like, I was highly developed feminine side, and women were like, oh, what a great guy. And then they would be like, are you gay? And I was like, you should find out.
Well, once I found out he wasn't gay, let me tell you, it was game on.
Was it?
It was.
A lot of not gayness happening
What
in the next 2
happened
weeks.
is about 2 weeks later, we're dating for a period of about 2 weeks. And I have to say, because this is important, before going out with him, I had a heartbreak where the person I thought I was going to marry and be with the rest of my life. And I remember being so heartbroken that I wrote on legal pad, you'll appreciate that, on the legal pad, 3 pages, top to bottom, all the qualities I was looking for in my ultimate partner for
you're
life.
One of the. Okay, yeah.
So, yeah, I was one of those. I wrote that list, and all the qualities were inner qualities. The person I wanted to be married to, who we would be for each other, with each other, separate from each other.
Those are good.
Our philosophies about life, our values, all of that. 3 pages. Can you imagine 3 pages,
I
top
mean,
to bottom?
I've seen it.
All inner qualities. However, after the 2 weeks of dating, within that 2 weeks, I thought, I
Wait a
think he's the
minute.
guy on my list. Back to my paper, and I'm reading the qualities, and I'm realizing this guy is the guy on my list. And then we had a nice makeout session without his shirt on, and I'm like, he is definitely the guy on my list.
And so it sounds like it's fairy tale from this point. What happened? What's the next call?
Well, I would say that we dated passionately, and we were clear in the very beginning.
yeah.
We both said, because we had come from heartbreak, and at that point in our lives, I believe we were both working on breaking up patterns with relationship. We had both realized enough that we had patterns in relationships.
Yeah.
Let's not do boyfriend and girlfriend. Let's just date. Let's stay in our separate camps and
Yeah.
practice just getting to know each other, not jumping in and saying, let's, be hardcore serious.
Yeah.
So we dated for about 4 or 5 months. And at month number 6, I was pretty clear he's the one. And as that was happening, you can tell how it was for you for those first 6 months until I got serious.
Were you playing the field? Yeah.
Yeah. I just couldn't imagine someone this amazing wouldn't find out that I was a jerk. And like many men, I want to have that ace in the hole so that as she's leaving, I can be like, too late, I left you already emotionally, right?
Yeah.
So I was kind of setting myself up for the inevitable fall.
And this is because you believed on some fundamental level that you were a jerk.
Yeah, I was unlovable. I was a jerk. She was going to find out that the exterior didn't
Right.
match the interior. Because in hindsight, most of the women that I dated would would date me for 2 years because the first year is great. Like your family loves me, your friends love me, I'm showing you a good time, I look good, I'm funny, I'm charming, I'm smart. But then after a while, there's like these holes, and the women are like, hey, there's a hole here. And I'm like, whatever. And they realized, okay, you're not going there, and you're not going to let me go there. And after they discovered enough holes, it was like, well, she got to go.
Yeah.
But for me, it was just like looking like this and having this much game. Next. So kind of a sad, sad story.
Yeah,
and
if
she
it
was next.
perpetuates it,
Yeah,
if
it was going to
keeps
perpetuate.
going. Yeah,
it was going to keep going.
So there's two things that are really important to me to recall when we were dating. One of them for me was, and a part of what was on my list, is I wanted to be with someone who was very willing to look at themselves in terms of personal growth. Don't do it for me. Just do it because you're on your path and you're doing it for yourself. And I wanted to be with someone who was interested in peeling their personal layers, because for me, I had gotten to this realization that, wow, I want to be the best human being I can be. And those words fell right out of his mouth in one of our dates. He goes, I'm just looking to be the best me that I can be, and that's why I'm interested in growing myself. I had never heard a man say that in all of my experience.
Did you mean it?
Completely.
Good.
I'm
For
not
me-
a liar. I'm a jerk. There's a difference.
Okay.
So for me, when I heard that, it was like, that's juicy. That's
Right.
juicy. A human being and a man that I'm attracted to is interested in working on himself.
Yeah, personal development is attractive. It
Right.
takes so much courage.
It does, and it's not an easy thing to do, and doing it inside of an intimate relationship. It's going to be challenging whether we're alone or with someone, but it's a lot more fun to play with someone who wants to play.
Yeah.
But so I want to make it really clear that I sound like a jerk to myself, but I grew up dysfunctional family, then latchkey kid with my dad gone at work 12, 14 hours a day, really too tall, too gangly, feeling dorky, feeling insecure. And it was just as I was meeting her that I was kind of coming into, I'm attractive, women do actually like me, I have a choice. And so it was just like, okay, let's go.
And then
finally.
you almost have to prove it to yourself, over and over.
Yeah.
That's what I experienced.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I remember that at that stage for me, it's one of those moments in your life when you're so tired of your own bullshit.
Yes.
Can I say that?
Oh, amen.
Can I say that?
Yes,
I mean, it's just
say
like
it.
I am.
Sing it.
So for me, I was just like, you know what? I know exactly what I do when I get in a relationship and the things that don't work. I need to stop doing that. And month number 6 of our dating, I saw myself falling into that pattern with myself. And it's like, oh, there's Desiree going off doing that thing that doesn't work. And she's trying to make it work because she doesn't want the relationship to disappear. Every girl has that moment, or woman has that moment where it's like, I don't want to rock the boat. I just want it, let's just keep it like it is and have this keep going well. But at some point,
Which is a recipe for
it's just a recipe for
stagnation.
you're not honoring your personal truth. So for me, what I realize is, my old behavior would be don't rock the boat, just go along with it because, I can accept that. I can be with that. I can let go of that. Like you negotiate what you're willing to tolerate. And I found myself doing that in this relationship. And he certainly wasn't the first person. He was, I just realized, I need to stop doing that. And I invited him over one day to my apartment because I needed to have a conversation with him about, I was getting up against my personal growth. Desiree needs to break up her pattern, what she does in relationships with men, period.
Right.
And you happen to be the one I'm with and the one I want to actually break this up with.
Wow.
So he came over, dashing and handsome, as usual. We were supposed to go on a date. And we sat down. I said, I need to talk to you about something because I recognized myself doing this thing. And part of it was I was at the point where I was ready to do a monogamous, committed boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. And we didn't have to do it that day, but I wanted to open up the conversation so that I could start being authentic about what was really going on in my heart. I'm really liking you beyond, what we've been doing. And I realize I'm not being honest with you about my feelings, and I want to have this conversation so we can talk about the future.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because when he came in, he was this light, and he was just so handsome. And he sat down, and he's listening, and he's excited, and we're going on this date today. And as I'm having this conversation about being authentic and
Getting heavier
can you
physically.
can you see the light draining right out of his face? It looked like
man.
he was full, and all of a sudden he looked like he was turning into a ghost in front of my eyes. And
Wow.
the life just drained right out of him, and he just looked at me like he had seen an alien. And
What did you make of
well,
it?
for me, as that was happening, I was really clear about two things. One, I had never done this before in a relationship.
Yeah.
And two, the reason I had never done it is I was terrified of the worst outcome.
Which was what you were seeing in front of you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right?
This is exactly why we don't do this. We don't go there because we don't want it to explode in our face. But it was essential for me, in order for me to really break up this pattern, I needed to say it.
Which could have, that whole experience could have been a foundation for you two not having good communication,
Absolutely.
right? Because you get the negative feedback.
Yeah.
So,
So if I would have continued, I'm really, looking back on it, I would have just perpetuated my codependent behavior to not rock the boat.
right. Okay. So that's happening. And why did it drain? Why did the life drain out
Because
of you?
she's asking for something that I know I can't do. Not consistently, not over time, not reliably.
Which means that not only are you going to lose her, but you're being something is being reflected back at you that you don't like about yourself at all.
And this happened much faster than I thought. I thought we were going to have some fun over time, and then we would get to that conversation where you would find out, actually, I'm not who you think I am.
So it just came to a head
Yep.
when you still had all the dopamine and passion
Right.
for each other. That's perfect timing.
It was.
So what happened?
I remember it like it happened yesterday.
Oh, good.
I remember it clearly because it was such a big moment for Desiree in her life. I felt like I was walking out onto this plank of a ship, and I was about to jump ship. And as the life was draining out of him in his face, and I saw it happening, his last words were, "I can't do that. I can't do this." And then he left. And I stood up, and I walked into my small kitchen, and I remember looking at a white wall. What a great metaphor. I was looking at this white wall, and I burst into tears because I had just jumped off that plank.
Yeah.
I just put myself, my value, my priority in terms of my personal growth ahead of a relationship, which means I made me valuable standing for something that I knew I needed to stand for.
It's interesting how you just put it as in contrast to the relationship. You're saying that you made your needs more important than the needs of the two of you together.
Right.
And is that a healthy thing or not? How do
It
you
was
see
very
that?
healthy for me because in the past I would acquiesce and or not compromise. I would just stuff the feelings or let slide. I would just not value what was really showing up for me, and I needed to value what was showing up for me, because if I couldn't speak it truthfully with him and with myself and stand for it,
Better to lose it.
yeah, it's better to lose it because I was used to not being truthful with myself.
Yeah.
And I needed to be truthful with myself. And the learning moment for me was, wow, as I was sobbing, I'm looking at the white wall and I'm sobbing. And this breaking myself open was really about breaking up my patterns. This is what I had done with men and relationships. And I just took a stand for myself, my self-esteem, my self-love, knowing that it's okay that the relationship didn't work out. What is great is you're figuring out who you are, Desiree, and good for you.
Yeah. Which could have been the end of it.
Can I just insert something
Yeah.
here? Because a number of years later, I was reading Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Successful People.
Mm-hmm.
And in there, he talks about healthy priorities, which is put yourself first and your relationship second, which is just not what most people do.
Yeah, it runs counter to the traditional wisdom or the media wisdom in modern America for sure. But it can be very unhealthy.
And if I do put myself first, then whatever happens after that, wife, child, work, family, friends, I'm not I'm not putting myself at the end of that with, the scraps at the end of the day. I'm starting out with myself fully recharged and then investing myself in the rest of my life, which I think works nicely.
Well, I was going to reserve this question for later, but since you're bringing it up, there does seem to be a shift, though, from dating where it's clearly important to put yourself first, so that you don't get into a codependent dynamic, and lifelong marriage commitment, where you have a third entity that is important in and of itself, which is the marriage. And I can imagine a healthy relationship in which the parties say, we put the marriage relationship before our individual needs because it feeds what we need as people. And then everything follows from that.
I can see the paradigm in terms of history as it has unfolded for men and women. It makes complete sense in that paradigm. And I think what we're learning about ourselves as human beings, as people, as we evolve, is that those feelings, if we don't address them, we don't have to address them, but we're going to find other ways to either act out and or resent our partner or resent how it's going, and it will manifest in some other way.
Yeah.
Either the unhappiness, if it goes on for years and it's a serious enough issue and or personal value that's not being addressed.
And then the relationship in the total hierarchy, would relationship come second?
Interchangeable with child.
So one of the things that Hans and I both knew before we got married, because he had come from a broken home, I had come from a broken home, divorced families.
Sure.
And we both were completely honest with ourselves that we don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
We know that we need to have better communication, healthy communication. We need to get tools, which we did. I mean, I have to say, and that's part of what was on the list, his willingness. That's all I was looking for, was a partner who was willing, like just someone who's like, I'm willing to open that closet door. It doesn't mean I'm going to.
He'll play the game.
Yeah. And so what we decided when we got married, before we got married, is we weren't looking to, and this is going to go against a lot of what's out there.
Do it.
But that whole phrase, you complete me. And one of the things I know about that phrase, it's a beautiful thing ultimately to say to your loved one. And at the same time, I think on a day-to-day basis, we sometimes don't even know how to complete with ourselves. If I can't make myself happy, how can I expect him to make me happy?
Yeah.
Day
I
in and
complete
day
me.
out. Right, exactly. And that's the only point I'm trying to make here, is that we both knew we didn't have, models or mentors how to do long-term healthy marriage. So, but we did agree that, you know what? I'm on my personal growth journey. You're on your personal growth journey. And what we both know is that we want to honor that in each other. And inside of honoring that as two separate human beings, we have a mutual commitment and love to bring that personal growth to each other, which it's called our marriage and our family.
Yeah.
And so throughout all the ups and downs of whatever we've been through, even inside of, those, we've had to peel layers around, either being deceptive or lying or what have you, normal stuff that happens in marriages. But what was great about it is we really brought ourselves back to, hey, this is my personal growth thing that I need to face and deal with. And when he was going through it or I was going through it, we weren't willing to be in denial. We were willing to tell the truth about this is how it really is, no matter how ugly it is. And I have to say there's probably 2 times in the 27 years that we both looked at each other and said, maybe we're not supposed to be together, or maybe this marriage isn't supposed to work.
What was your marriage vows? Did you make the lifetime commitment that so many people do?
I don't remember the verbiage, but I remember that it wasn't traditional.
But you did say lifetime.
For sure.
Yes.
And and you believe that?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. We were signing up forever, knowing that we didn't have the answers how to do forever.
We're going to create this together. We don't know how we're going to do it. We don't have a history that shows us how to do it, but we're going to do this together. And that was delightful. Like co-creating it was pretty neat. Like, let's get the new knowledge, the new skills, the tools, the processes to do this. And at the same time, we don't know if it's going to happen or not.
Right.
But we were both fully in. Like we're both feet in.
That's the throwing your hat over the wall concept, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, what a great way to think of it.
I noticed that when men and women get together, the extraordinary thing about women is that they marry the possibility of a man. They're standing there on the day and marrying the man, but they're really marrying the possibility of a man.
Really? You think you could say that's a female thing?
Oh my goodness, yes.
You don't think a man's marrying the possibility of a woman?
No, come on. Here, let me finish it out. Men are marrying the fantasy of the woman, but women are really marrying the possibility of the man. I just think that women see what's possible for men, and then let's spend our lives living into that possibility. And I think that for so many men, it fairly quickly turns into this mother-child thing of, why don't you love me the way my mommy did, or why don't you love me just the way I am? And so we've got women who are seeing this possibility, and men who are like, I like me just the way I am. Ultimately, just leave me alone. I'm fine.
One of the triggers for anyone, either person in a marriage, is, why are you trying to change me?
Right.
You're trying to change me. And I don't think this is about, quote unquote, changing a person. Because let's face it, we're all going to change.
Yeah.
Who I am today is not who I'm going to be tomorrow. Who I am when I was 20 is not who I am today.
Yeah.
So change is inevitable. And I think there's a difference between trying to change someone through manipulation and control them. That is not healthy. That's, dysfunctional behavior. As opposed to what Hans is saying is bring out the best in each other. Let's grow as two people who, I want to be the best person I can be, and I'm in love with the possibility of the best person he can be.
And so,
Yeah.
all this swinging back to the idea that I was going to discover, that I was going to get to discover for the rest of my life, the ever deepening levels of growth and love and intimacy and communication, like that was going to take me the rest of my life to do that with Desiree, because she's such a gorgeous person inside and out that I could just see there's no way I'm going to bankrupt this relationship. There's no way I'm going to get tired of her and just be like, okay, well, now is that. Who's next? Because as I age, I grow and she grows, and now there's this new level of intimacy and closeness and love to explore. So the idea of doing that for the rest of my life with her, that's what I signed up for.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to The Together Show, the podcast about what's really going on in relationships. And we are definitely talking about what's really going on with my guests today, Hans and Desiree Phillips. So, okay, now that you're talking about some whenever I hear somebody say that men are this way and women are that way, I think, okay, maybe, this is a paradigm that is working for you and maybe makes the two of you happy, but universalizing that gets really dangerous really fast. But you stand behind this one.
I do. I mean, for both of us, because Desiree, does growth work with people, and so do I. And I just see the masculine, I see men being a particular way, women being. Now, I'm all about people being people, and I spent most of my life like, you're a person first, because that's how we got married. I was like, I'm looking for a partner, not a wife. And she's like, good.
Yeah.
Magic statement. I'm telling you.
Which I want to say that in the past 27 years, there have been times where I thought to myself, gosh, why didn't I marry a wife? Could sure use a wife right about now.
We're on this delicious tangent from the story of what happened back when you were kids and you were on this date and you thought you'd lost him. And he said, I can't take this. And he left. Hans, what happened after that?
I was disappointed, but I just went into the next part of my cycle of,
A new woman?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now there's going to be some loss, but now I'll get to say yes to whoever's next.
Yeah.
And so the suppression of my grief, or the denial of the impact, that was just the next part of my cycle.
It's so lonely.
There have been a couple of those moments in my life, yeah. But mostly, if I'm just out there and social enough, there's somebody who it's like, well, if they're not interested in me, I'll pursue them. Or
But you escaped it. I mean, you're articulating the death spiral of a lot of men, particularly attractive men who were not attractive when they were younger. I think that's a kind of a standard thing. But you got pulled out. So how did you guys end up getting back together?
Oh, it's very interesting. He left. I felt destroyed. It's that heartbreak where girls or women were just out of our mind, like, what just happened? Why did I do that? The self-doubt, sets in, and I'm crying at the wall going, why did I do that? However, I knew it was the best thing. That is the best thing I had ever done for myself at that time in my life, because that was just the beginning of me in a different way, peeling the layer another level for me. Like,
Right.
What does Desiree do with men in relationship? And so there were two things that I remember I always wanted to do. One was either go to Japan or do this course. It was a ropes course. It was a combination of, facing your fears and just going way outside of yourself, out of your box. And those are two things that were really important to me. And so I brought myself back to, let's make a decision about doing one of these two things. And I said, you know what? Pick the scarier thing. Japan was not that scary. The ropes course was terrifying.
Really?
So, yeah.
Okay. So you did it.
So I did it. So I did this ropes course that summer. He and I broke up, and we just said, we'll just put this to bed, and we'll stay in touch, and have a great life or what have you. So it ended on pleasant enough terms that we didn't hate each other, but we weren't talking to each other.
Right.
And when I did this ropes course, it was incredible, because this is the amazing part. I discovered that in relationships with men, what I did, my whole thing was that I always felt like I was giving more in a relationship. So if, they were giving 30, I was giving 70, or I was giving 60 and they were giving 40, or I was giving 85 and they were giving 15. But it was never this 50-50 split of what was being put into the relationship. The thing that I had done in all of those relationships with men, regardless of what a man was giving or my interpretation of what he was giving, I had never given 100% of myself to any relationship with a man.
Yeah.
I would give 98, but I won't give you the 2%.
Yeah, because you've got to prove it to me before I do that.
Well, there's
or something.
that, and it's like, why would I? Why do I have to give 100% if you're not giving as much as me anyway? So I had this justification in my mind. My 70% is good enough. My 80% is good enough. My 60%. So I was ripping myself off by not ever playing the game of 100% in relationship.
Out, yeah.
So when I recognized what I was doing, just me, myself, and I, my reoccurring theme, I thought, wow, that's pretty ugly. That's ugly from looking at my humanity, not that I was a terrible person, but I was just
no.
This
I get it. We all do those things,
right.
And that was one you needed to see.
So I had a break during one of these, during this ropes course, and I called him on the break, and he had this answering machine that was funny, and I expected to get it, and he picked up the phone. I didn't get the answering machine that I expected to get. He picked up the phone, and I was caught off guard, and I said, wow. Okay, I need to make this quick. I'm on a break, and I need to say something to you, but it's really important. Do you have a moment? And he said, sure, go. And I said, first of all, I want to apologize to you. But before I apologize, I want to say that I'm disappointed on how things went, how we broke up, how we split up. And what I want to apologize to you for is that I have been playing a really small game in relationships with men, and this, you in particular. Like, I never gave you 100%, and I'm calling myself out on this. And I don't even know what my 100% looks like with anyone. So that's my bad, if you will, and I just want to say sorry. I never, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it looks like, but I want to apologize for that. And I'm sad that it didn't happen for us or with us. And as I'm saying all of this to him in this 10-minute conversation, I feel like the world is getting off of my back. Yeah. The burden, the whatever I had made up about him and why he was a jerk or why we weren't working out, all of that stuff just started to fall away. And what I now know is ultimately I was letting go of these chains, if you will, these invisible chains, and I was surrendering to my process.
You know what's so fascinating about that is that the reason you broke up is unrelated to this insight that you're having. They're separate things.
Exactly.
But the insight allowed you to, not have the fact that the impetus for the breakup be so important?
Well, I think what was happening is I wasn't
the bad guy anymore. Like, she was being responsible for the breakup. She took me out of the equation, and she saw what she was doing that she would have done with me or
the next
some other guy.
Yeah. And that was what was exciting, because what I ended the phone call with is I said, you know what? You're great. I think you're amazing, and you're going to have a great life. And what I also know is that I'm great, and I'm amazing, and I'm going to have a great life. Yeah. And both of us deserve to have what we believe is possible out there in the world, and I'm going to go do that. And he said, just before we hung up, he said, can I ask you a question? And I said, yeah. And he goes, will you look me up when you come back home?
Hans, are you familiar with the 0%, 100% rule?
No, sir.
From this is something that people who've gone through the Landmark Forum sometimes talk about. The idea that in a relationship, you are 100% responsible for how that goes. and your partner is 0% responsible. And that's the only way that a relationship can work, is if you are 100% responsible and you place 0% responsibility on your partner.
We're playing a different game. We're both 100% responsible.
Well, that's the interesting thing, is that then people will say, "Oh, that makes so much sense," but then they'll pause for a minute and say, "Well, assuming my partner is also playing 100%,
Right.
which isn't in fact the point."
Right.
Exactly.
And that's what I was getting at with him in this
Yes.
call. It's like, you know what? It's not about you. I was going to go do this, whatever this wacky thing is that wasn't working.
Don't worry about it. There's a phone vibrating, which is what
Right.
I'm responding to, but don't worry about it.
Okay.
And so that was one of the pivotal moments in my life, because I was really clear that this amazing woman who had just had this amazing experience called me and said, "You're great, and isn't it kind of sad, or there's something here?" And that's what I asked her was, "Are you done with me?" And she said no, and that was the beginning of the rest of our relationship.
I really checked myself because my ego was done with him. I thought, if I was all in my, ego, of course I am. Are you kidding me? But then I really got present. Like, what is it that's going on with me? And I said, you know what? I looked at him and I said, I guess I wouldn't be here if I was.
What I looked at was, if she leaves, it's just me in the darkness. Like, I know what's coming next.
Yeah.
And if she stays, it's really scary, but I have no idea what can happen. And I actually made that decision. When I hung up the phone with her, when she was still on the mountain, I burst into tears, and not from happiness or joy. It was just, I was terrified of what came next. And the inside of my head actually said to me, "Dude, what are you doing? She's gone. She was done. And what are you reeling her back in for?"
Yeah.
But it was the possibility of what could have been, or what could be, that I was like, if I don't torpedo this, if I don't self-sabotage, if I don't just do what's automatic, something might be able to happen.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to The Together Show, the podcast about what's really going on in relationships. My guests today are Hans and Desiree Phillips. We've been talking about two separate storylines simultaneously and the lessons in each one. And I want to finish them both.
Sure.
So the one storyline is the 3 phone calls that have saved the relationship in the course of the 27 years. And the other storyline is the 2 different times you almost ended it.
Right.
So let's go to the 3rd phone call, because that's the story that we're the nearest to completion with. So what happened with this 3rd phone call?
One of my patterns with men in relationship is I would tell them, if you ever do this, I'm going to break up. I'm not going to be here. I'm going to be gone. And it was like my warning. If you do this, I'm going to do that, and end of story. And I had done that in several relationships. Well, interestingly, that set up in my relationships a pattern of, if they found themselves doing something that wasn't satisfactory to me, or that crossing that line, it put them immediately in a position of not telling the truth.
Right, of course, because they know the consequence is so high that of
Right.
course they're going to lie about it.
Exactly.
Yeah, interesting.
So when we were in the foreign country, he had an opportunity to basically tell me the truth about, this thing that he had done, that he knew that I would break up with him.
Yeah.
And it was scary for him to go out on that limb and say, I know what the consequence is for this, but it's really important that I share this with you.
Yeah. Is this something you're allowed to share with us?
We've never hidden it from anybody.
Well, I had been having affairs, and
what year was this in the relationship, or how far in were you?
It happened when we were dating, and it also happened in the first year of our marriage.
And this trip?
is before we get married.
Okay.
So we're in Europe, and we're having a conversation about integrity and being honest. And there's a part of me that's like, wow, what a great place to drop this bomb. 3,000 miles from home. We're going to be all done if you do this.
Yeah.
And she's quiet for 24 hours, but then she comes back with this crazy making statement, which is, I do not approve of your behavior, but I'm willing to talk to you about our commitment. And I'm just like, what the?
Wow. That's the ultimate response. I mean, that's the response with the most self-awareness. Well, if I say that, I'm casting aspersions on people who didn't stick it out in the face of infidelity. But I think very highly of your response. Let me put it that way.
And
which didn't stop me from doing it again once we got married. But I think that for a lot of men, having an ace in the hole so that when she does figure out who we're not or what we're not, and she goes to leave, we're like, hey, I'm already half checked out. So I just could not stop myself from doing that. And Desiree has been extraordinary over the years at seeing a way out of my self-sabotage.
so I feel like it's really important for me to address where I was coming from and how we got through it and what I was thinking, because prior to this relationship with him and our relationship and marriage is at the end of one of my relationships, my boyfriend said, oh, well, we're breaking up anyway, so I might as well tell you I cheated on you 7 times. On top of everything else that's going on.
That was a slap. That was just an intentional slap in the face.
Beyond, like, we weren't breaking up for that reason, but for him to tell me at the end, like, you might as well know this. So that's the context.
He's a bigger jerk than I am.
That's the context of when it came up in my relationship with Hans. I realized this is something that I am going through a second time in a different relationship. I don't know why, but I do know that it's important to get to the bottom of it. I can't pretend it's not happening, and I don't want to pretend that, even if this is not the right person for me, I want to get to the source of why is this, what's happening between us that's causing this activity to come up.
Yeah.
That's what I was after. And I'm never going to...
You were pissed.
I was upset, and this is what I told him when he told me. I said 2 things. 1, I appreciate you saying what's really going on, because if we're not dealing with the truth and real communication, then I have nothing to go on. We have nothing to work with.
Right.
And even though this truth is ugly, I much rather deal with an ugly truth than an illusion of what I think is happening.
Right.
Which was what happened in my prior relationship. So that's also another reason why I'm like, I don't approve of the behavior, but what are we committed to here? What are we looking at here?
Yeah.
So I was willing to look at
with the possibility of the relationship staying alive.
With the possibility, because I'm either going to figure this out and get to the bottom of it 100%, because my whole thing, coming from 100%, I'm going to get to it. Whether this is it or not, whether it's him or not, at least I'm going to be giving it 100%. And that was a part of it also. It's like, hey, we're here, and no guarantee it's going to work. We already established that. No guarantee that it's going to work.
Right.
And we need to figure this out. Like, is this... Because here's the thing. If this is something that he was going to keep doing, I was definitely not going to tolerate it, and I was going to leave.
So that's the next point. So I'm assuming you did figure it out in that moment, but then you did it again after the wedding. So Hans, what was the insight you had that first time? What did you promise? And then what broke down?
Well, the insight that I had was that it was possible to be in a loving relationship, a lifelong loving relationship, a committed relationship. And I just didn't have a lot of practice with doing that. And so I come from a long history of self-annihilation. So the idea that I was going to never self-annihilate again, I just couldn't see it. And I bumped into a woman, and, I was like, all right, well, here we are.
This was the first time or the
second?
No,
this is after I get married. And so to interrupt the pattern, for me, I had to put something big at stake. And so the promise I made to myself, forget the promise I make to her, the promise I make to myself after that 6 months into my marriage is, if I ever do that again, I leave Desiree.
So wait. The first time...
For six times.
The first... okay. The time that she first called you out, I should say.
Yep.
The stakes weren't high enough for you to make a high promise, and you didn't believe it was possible to change. So did you tell her you were going to change?
We definitely had a conversation about how is it going to be differently, how is it going to go differently, but we're still just in a boyfriend-girlfriend committed relationship. Yeah. So I don't actually believe it, but she's willing to give it a go. I'm willing to give it a go. Okay, let's do this.
Yeah.
And I think well,
Looking back, does that feel out of integrity? Like, were you
Oh,
lying?
absolutely. I wasn't
Okay.
lying. No, it was not malicious. It was a lack of information. I
and,
had
and a lack of maturity.
knowledge.
I would say
Lack
also a
of
lack of maturity
emotional
because
maturity.
emotional maturity. Because we both, when we were in that foreign country, I said, look, I'm going to have a lot of questions. You know, this may seem like something that just happened to you, but this is, has been put to bed for you, but it's just now happening for me. So you need to be willing to answer questions, listen, like go through my process of grief and upset
Yeah.
from a compassionate place and understand that this is something that you created and we get to uncreate, the trauma together. So we went through the practice of it, but it didn't guarantee putting a bow on top of it.
Right. And unfortunately for me, it played into my childhood cycle of I'm a bad boy, I get caught, and then it's how much trouble am I in? How much do they know? How much are they going to find out? How much do they want to know? So it just played into that whole cycle.
And then how charming you can be to get out of it.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so then for the second time around, now there was some risk for you. You didn't want to continue this cycle.
Yeah, and at the same time, with how forgiving she had been, it was just like...
And I was clear I was not going to tolerate it. After that, I'm like, this is it.
But I was charming enough and delusional enough to be like, she'd probably forgive me again. So I really had to put a stake in the ground. Like, okay, if I do this, I leave Desiree. And there are attractive women out there that are worth a weekend, but not the rest of my life with Desiree.
Did you ever cheat again after that?
I did not. And it really, when my son was born, is really when it was like, okay, we're all done.
You know what I love about it is just the acknowledgement of that human process.
Well, and that's something that I feel has really served our marriage when you go into decades of being married. I love that I can tell Hans anything, really anything. And it has included, more recently, just this, my age, I'm 52, and I think a woman starts to think, okay, so am I going to stay with this person for the rest of my life? And it's not because I'm not madly, deeply in love with them. It's just I'm reevaluating my whole life. And our good friend and therapist says this is a part of that process in your life. That's what women do. And so we start to, really look at, am I happy? Am I fulfilled? And of course I am. I feel those things authentically. And I'm not going to lie, I've wondered, because I've been loyal from the time I became his girlfriend, day one. I have to go back. I have a Cabana Boy card. I have a Cabana Boy card when all the stuff we went through around affairs. It's like, and you know what?
And you too.
I get a Cabana Boy card, and I can play it whenever I want it.
Every time we go to the tropics, I'm like, please have this nothing but ugly Cabana Boys, old, wrinkled Cabana Boys.
It's our inside joke between the two of us, but I have to say it's helped lighten the whole ideology.
Significance
exactly,
around it
the
all,
significance. So fast forward about, fantasies and, am I ever going to have a fling of, honestly, I can say 100% I believe I never will, because I'm so madly, deeply in love with Hans, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and physically. He fulfills so many of those things in terms of what I'm after in life.
It's almost like I complete you.
Sorry,
it was a wraparound.
That was a good wraparound.
That was really good. But my point, the reason I bring that up is because being able to have those kind of conversations with your spouse and say, hey, I'm having this thought or this fantasy or this fear, and him being able to say, honor me. And one of the things he said in one of those conversations was, I love you. I'm in love with you. I honor your process. I believe in you. If you have to go there and do whatever you have to do, we'll deal with it when we get there.
Is that communication? Is that when people say you got to have communication in a relationship?
Absolutely.
Is that what they mean?
Yeah,
me being able to say what's really true as opposed to lying to him about what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
But also, in the last 2 years, there's been things that she's experienced and wanted to experience and do that I thought I could handle, and then as it's unraveling, I'm just like, wow, I can't actually handle this. And I know it's really important to her, so I got to get a third person in here. So we go have conversations with people who are professionals with emotions in the mind, and we'll go sit down with a therapist. And the last time we did that, by the end of the therapy session, the therapist was on my side saying, well, Desiree, you might not be able to do that. And I was like, actually, I don't need that.
Yeah.
After this hour of conversation, I'm actually good. And I don't need what I thought I did when I walked in here. So for me to have some latitude of just like, yeah, I totally trust this woman. Like, I know her. I trust her completely. She's been reliable the whole time. Well, I wouldn't say the same thing about me. But her, like, she's steady Eddie. And whatever she's exploring, she's going to explore it and come back, and it's going to inform our marriage. So it was really good to be able to just let it go. Like, yeah, I don't need that. I don't need that security. I don't need that safety. I'm good. She's good.
Yeah, I don't need the security, the false security.
I've heard I'm not going to do that. Good. I feel better.
Yeah. No, it's not about that. It's about the ride. You're experiencing it together.
And I feel for me, in this realm of self-exploration, I don't know if it's because it's who I am or my character or what have you, but I'm just fearless about, one, I believe in loyalty and integrity for myself because that's just what works for me. So in my communication with him, I'm going to be fearless around what's really there. I don't have anything to hide, and I feel really good about my integrity. So I have nothing to lose except what's going to happen in the conversation. And I'm not coming from being, I've got the right idea or the right plan. I'm just being, honest with him about what's really there for me, and we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
Whatever's supposed to come up in the conversation, we'll talk about it. But I'm glad we're having the conversation as opposed to hiding out from one another.
Hiding it.
Yeah.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to The Together Show, the podcast about what's really going on in relationships. And I'm talking today with Hans and Desiree Phillips, who are so totally in love with each other. It really just radiates off of the two of you. Did you already tell me the first thing that almost broke you up? Was it the infidelity?
The first time was, it was the first year our son was born. There were just so many moving parts and changes. I was having health issues. He was discovering some emotional pieces between becoming a father and his own childhood. And so that's an interesting thing, is that we were both weak, so to speak, at the same time. We were used to, up until this point, and we had been married 10 years before our son was born. So we were used to one of us being strong and helping the other one, get stronger. One can be weak, one can be strong. But at this point, that time when our son was born, we were both down at the same time. He was down emotionally, I was down physically. And that's the first time divorce had ever come up for us.
And so how long into the marriage was that?
10 years.
So you're 10 years in, but your son is 1 year old.
He's a baby.
So he was a baby, and you were starting to question.
Right. Because neither one of us had anything to give or generate with each other. Mm-hmm. My resources were spent on being a new mom, and that's the hallmark
of parenthood, isn't it? I mean, That's the thing that people deal with when they're new parents.
Absolutely.
You're both exhausted, and you're facing these critical life and death questions about your child.
Right.
And you feel more responsible for that kid than you've ever felt for anything. More important than your relationship, really.
Right. And it feels naturally easier to give up on a marriage or a relationship than it is to give up on your child. You're never going to give up on your child. You're going to give everything you have to be the best parent you can be for your child.
So if something's going to break, it's going to be the relationship.
And for a man, I was getting some of my needs met, and now I'm getting a lot less of my needs met, and not much sleep. And I'm seeing these holes in my... This is probably not going to work.
Yeah, you're tired. You can't even make good decisions when you're that tired.
So what was interesting about that, in terms of how we recovered, is we said, you know what? We had the realization or the observation that we're both really tapped.
Yeah.
Let's not make any big decisions right now.
Smart move, and that is like the simplest answer to it.
Exactly.
But how long does that ceasefire last?
So what we said is, let's not make a big decision for a year. Let's get to the year mark. Uh-huh. If we feel the same, we'll revisit this conversation. Uh-huh. But let's get to the year mark and let's see what happens. Well, what's so funny? The year mark came and went and we forgot about it.
Yeah. Because you gave yourself some, why?
Leeway. Why did we give ourselves...
No, but why did it work?
I think it worked because we had, at 10 years married, plus 3 years on top of that, 13 years boyfriend and girlfriend. We had 13 years of experience. We knew what our best looked like as a couple, and we knew what we had been through, the ups and downs, and how to recover from them. We had never done it as parents. We had never done it as a new mom and dad, but we had enough, not only the emotional investment, but the experience of... we have tools. Yeah. And if anybody gets anything out of this conversation today, tools don't reinvent the wheel. They're out there.
They already exist, do they not?
They're out there. And if you're willing to pick up a tool and you don't want to pick up the therapy tool, but you're willing to pick up a book and a workbook, or you're willing to go to a meeting or do something, just do something that's actually going to, create movement and space and growth.
When I developed the course that we have for new couples to work on their relationships, that's what we kept seeing. The tools are the same tools, the specific tools, the what to do in the moment tools are the same tools that they've been for 600 years. And there's no need to reinvent them. And the processes to get access to those tools are also the same. You can do it. There's so many ways. So what we did was distill down the tools and deliver them in another format.
Right.
But there's so much access out there if you want it.
Exactly. And I think that's key right there. What's the difference between making it and not making it? Do you want it?
Yeah.
Are you willing to invest and work towards it? Now, here's something that I always thought was amazing is that I worked 25 years building self-esteem with kids, and there was a conversation I had with someone, a colleague, and he said, when you're raising a child, because he was dealing with troubled teens, and he said parents are going to do the work on the front end or the back end, but you're going to do the work.
Yeah.
So you're either going to front end meaning preventative.
Yeah. At which point it's a lot easier.
Right. And it doesn't mean you're not going to have breakdowns or trouble with your teen, but it just means that you're going to have more tools and your teen will have more tools. I feel the same way about relationship.
Yeah.
You're going to do work on the front end or the back end. Even if you decide you're not going to do anything, you're still going to have consequences or ramifications of what didn't happen or what did happen. And I feel like that's what Hans and I have lived and experienced, is the preventative aspects.
I like what our friend Shandor says. He says when he gets in a fight with his wife, he looks at, is he committed to it being like it is for the rest of his life?
Yeah.
And if he's not, then he says, what's the next action that's in line with staying married?
Yeah.
And he said those 3 steps across the kitchen are the longest and hardest 3 steps that he ever has to take.
Oh, they're so hard.
But he's taken it again and again.
Yeah.
And I think that looking at, this is how it is and it sucks, but is this how I want it to be? No? Great. What am I going to do about it? And we have this tendency to move away when we're scared. And so if I'm actually going to do something about it, I got to move closer. I've got to touch or hold or, make eye contact or calm down.
Because again, that's how you create intimacy in the relationship, which is what you're after. I'm reminded of Joseph Campbell, the great mythologist, right?
Absolutely, he's great.
He in an interview, he alluded to this concept. He was being interviewed on archetypal human concepts, as he always was, and talking about marriage. And he alluded to this concept that he referred to as second marriage. He didn't talk much about it, which is why I say it's an illusion. But he basically suggested that couples go through a renaissance in their relationship that he called second marriage. And it happens around year 20-ish. I don't know, maybe that was his era. But the idea was a certain type of striving goes away and is replaced by a recognition, an experience of peace that comes from a recognition that we've got 20 years of history and depth creation together, and we are not going to be able to get that anywhere else. So whatever challenges we may have cared about a moment ago, do they really matter in the face of what we've got?
Well, I have something to share with you.
Yeah.
The sex is amazing.
That's what I hear. The sex gets so much better with the increase in intimacy.
We often feel like teenagers. And I don't mean just, the teenage aspect of teenagers, but the passion. We're very passionate. And I know that passion comes from the emotional maturity as well as the awareness and appreciation of one another. And
well, you're both still hot is another thing.
We work at it.
Do you? Tell me
we
more.
Absolutely do.
Yeah.
No,
for this reason.
Well,
no, it wasn't
just,
for this
This
reason.
This is self-worth. This is self-love. The easy thing to do is just sort of slip into habits and behaviors and what do we call it? Fettuccine alfredo. It's just like, I'll have another plate of that, right? Cupcake, I'll have a cupcake. And for us, it's really, okay, so what's the highest and best use of my body and my mind and my heart and my spirit? And, chasing Desiree, It's a lifetime endeavor because she's on her growth edge, has been since the moment I laid eyes on her, and so me being on my growth edge is what there is to do.
I think it's very easy. The longer you are in a relationship or a marriage, it's very easy to... Now, let me say something before I say this, because I realize I think making yourself happy is important.
Yeah.
So if making yourself happy includes eating whatever you want, whenever you want, then hallelujah.
Yeah.
You're happy. You're there.
Yeah.
I am a person who needs to be in my body. And I want to say that I've been many different shapes and sizes throughout our marriage. And it's really important for me to say that as well. 2 different times, close to 200 pounds for different reasons.
Wow.
I
mean, probably nobody will see you within this podcast, but you look amazing.
Thank you.
200 pounds is hard to imagine.
I hear you. And one of the things I have to say about that is throughout my history and being in my body, I feel very blessed that I've always loved who I am as a human being from the inside out, not the outside in. So even when I was 200 pounds, I have no shame around that size. I love to dress. I dress to the nines at 200 pounds.
It's not a shameful thing unless you say so.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And but the thing of it is, our culture very much puts a lot of emphasis on what we look like, and
true.
we buy into the images. My point is, Hans has loved me at every shape and size, and he has always told me, I'm in love with you no matter what. And he has always learned to love whoever I am, whatever I look like at these different stages of our marriage.
Yeah.
In the last 6-ish years, I took on this whole new level of fitness. Even though I've been active my whole life, I've danced my whole life, I've ran, skated, I've done all kinds of things, but following my personal truth includes having my body be the best instrument possible. And that's what put me on a whole nother journey, fitness journey, which has me, look the way I do today. But I want to be really clear that loving ourselves, whatever that looks like to ourselves, is most important.
It's so respectful of yourself and therefore so respectful of your partner. What were you going to say, Hans?
That one of the things that I did to maintain my commitment with Desiree was I stopped letting media tell me what sexy was, what attractive was, and I started defining everything by Desiree. So when Desiree was heavier, it was like, okay, that's what sexy is. So I defined everybody compared to Desiree, as opposed to Desiree compared to everybody.
Yeah.
And so that was really helpful for me over time in terms of focusing myself. So Desiree defines what sexuality is for me.
Yeah.
She's the most attractive woman that I know. So whatever makes you happy, like, in an agreement with your partner, because the thing that got me fit again was Desiree was going for it, like going to get to a new level of fitness. And I'm a slender build, so I can dress like I'm not flabby, but I was getting flabby, like I was getting a little belly. I'm 55 now. And it was just like, okay, well, let's both get fit. And it has been a renaissance for us emotionally and physically and mentally.
Spiritually, sexually.
Yeah. And not all of it in great ways, like she's on fire. She's not putting out her fire. She is on fire. And so she's exploring things that, are threatening to me. But we're partners, so we're going to go explore that and we'll work it out.
How threatening? Scary threatening?
Yeah.
And when that fear starts to come up, does it ever threaten to overwhelm you?
Definitely.
And what do you do?
Have a conversation, and then
with her?
And then if
immediately,
if that doesn't go well, and she has conversations with me too, she's bringing stuff up, and it's fine. But if it doesn't go well, it's like, okay, we got to go see a therapist.
Yeah.
So as long as there's that third person in the room and they're trained, that's our insurance policy. Neither one of us are committed to being afraid. We just get afraid.
Yeah.
And we don't want our fear to break us down or break us up. So let's work through this part of our fear at this age, whatever age that is.
Right. And however it manifests. Yeah. Because the fear is inevitable.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
That's what I love hearing you two talk about, because people don't want to acknowledge it. And when they start to experience those first, particularly in the newer relationships, those first twinges of that fear.
This drives me crazy, because the amount of love that you have, the amount of joy that you have, when the fear comes, it's going to be as deep as that is high. So you meet people and you're like, what happened to Bob? Oh, he was Satan. What do you mean? You were totally in love with him.
Yeah.
He was the best thing going. You were going to, build houses together.
Yeah.
So that reaction doesn't get handled in the relationship. And anybody that I talk to that's in a new relationship, I'm like, make sure you talk about when it goes south, what are we going to do? Like, have a plan, because it's going to go south.
It's gonna go. It
and
will.
the higher it is,
go.
the lower it's going to go. And
Yeah.
people in the low are just like, oh, it can't be right because it wouldn't be this bad. No, it is right because it is that bad.
So I need to say, this is what I forgot earlier, is we've been conditioned to this Cinderella story, or whatever the story is that you grew up listening to, that, you meet your prince and you get married, and after you get married, both of you are happily ever after. And that whole happily ever after, I mean, I'm not down on happily ever after, but it doesn't say anything in that story about, and so when you hit the hard times, that's a part of the happily ever after, is getting through it together.
Yeah.
You don't have to kill them off and go find a new prince or a new princess. You go get some tools. They didn't talk about that in the story, and I wish it was in the story, but that's what I was going to say earlier, is we all have been conditioned to some expectation that we're trying to live up to, and it's in our minds, or it's in the stories we've been told, or some fantasy. I mean, people have said and shared to us, like, they think, how we've done what we've done in terms of being in love and relationship. It looks easy from the outside looking in.
Right.
This is work.
Yeah.
But worth it.
It is absolutely worth it.
Well, okay. So speaking of, what was the second moment when you almost divorced?
The very beginning, when we were having a fight. Actually, chronologically, we're going out of order. It was in the very beginning of our marriage. We were having a fight, and I'll never forget it, because I brought up divorce, and Hans were in his adorable car.
The Volvo that I could peel out in if I tried really hard.
He pulls. It's at night. We're coming home from going out. He pulls off the freeway. Not off the freeway like onto a safe street, but just like off the freeway onto the
side of the road.
The side of the freeway. And he said, "Here's the deal." He said, "We're gonna have fights. I'm really clear about that. We're gonna have fights. And if we ever bring up the D word, divorce, I want it to be like, we'll go there and we'll talk about divorce, but let's not ever use that word unless that's what we really want to talk about."
Yeah.
And in that moment, I was like, wow. That's good.
That is good.
That's really good. Because how often do we throw the threat around? And I think, on some level, we all have a fear of abandonment breaking up, I'm leaving you, whatever. It's an easy out.
Yeah.
And especially if you don't mean it.
Yeah.
And so when he demonstrated his commitment and said that, blew me away. I thought, that's really good. I'll never use that word again. I'll never throw that out there lightly as if it means nothing.
It does seem like at the beginning of your relationship, I'm imagining race cars going down a track with, rubber sides. And you guys were kind of bouncing into the rubber sides at the beginning. And now, things still happen that jerk the wheel.
Absolutely.
All the time, in fact. Maybe even more, because you're more in touch with yourselves. But you're not bouncing off the walls anymore.
Good analogy. I like that.
Well, and that's a lot of maturity is the general phrase for that. That's maturity. But what specifically?
I feel like emotional growth. Mm-hmm. Hans said it earlier, healing, taking on our individual healing, honoring our process, being in communication as we honor our process.
Yeah.
There's something I know about my marriage with Hans, and that is, no matter what, I can come to him and say what's really there, and vice versa.
That's the communication piece that's so touching about the two of you. Well, okay, so we're really winding. We're way over time, and there's a question I've been really curious about that keeps coming up for the two of you, and I think we can use this to close. The idea of trust. You both have a lot of trust for one another, and I've heard you use the word. Can you guys define that for me? What the heck is trust?
Well, I like what our mentor Tex said about trust. You can deal with trust in one of two ways. Either it's earned or it's a gift. And Desiree keeps giving me the gift of trust.
Trusting you.
Yeah, which has me give the gift of trust to myself. because I've never been with a person who is as trusting, who is as present, who is as loving as she is. And so she just keeps we just keep reestablishing it. And when it gets broken, there's a willingness to work on it. And like you said before about the 100% responsibility, it's like she's willing to be responsible for the circumstances that led to the breakdown in our trust.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the big deal. That's the big deal.
Because then it's shared.
That's right.
And one of the things I want to say about, especially if you've been through infidelity or it's happened, that's a big thing to overcome. And it's very easy if you're in my position that I was in, that you're looking for evidence to not trust your partner. And that is the worst thing in our situation that I could have done, because I knew that when I went to bed every night and we had gotten through the breakdown of the conversation and how we're going to address it, it's like my job at that point was to go to bed. And this is literally what I did, is I told myself, I trust this man. I made it a mantra for myself that I trust him, because inside of what fell apart and inside of what we decided we were going to do, once we made the decision to step into how to reinvent being together, that was the agreement that we made. And he was going to work on himself.
Yeah.
And I am going to work on myself. Even though I didn't cheat on him, I'm going to work on whatever got in the way in the space of us not being connected or intimate. It's like, oh, I can see that, I understand that a lot of what we went through during those years had a lot to do with how, he was healing something that was very dark.
Yeah.
Between him and his biological mom and things like that. And so for me to not take that personal, like his first experience of love and a woman, it was very, broken. His birth mom left him at 6 months.
Yeah.
So that's real.
Yeah.
And that's not about me. So for him to find love,
but it impacts you.
Absolutely. And that's, it did impact me. And it's not like it's okay to write it off. It was just, I understood. I had compassion for what we were healing.
Yeah.
That's what I want to get to.
Well, you two are just an absolute wellspring of relationship wisdom. This has been an incredible
I wish
pleasure.
this had gone better.
If only our relationship.
Thank you so much. It's been really fun, really moving. There were points where I just like, wow, I almost lost this woman. What an idiot I am.
Well, I mean, but that again, those are the moments where the two of you grew even deeper. The roots went even deeper, and that, I think, if anything, is the greatest lesson from the two of you. Is for particularly people who are in their first marriages and have what I think of as the fairy tale fantasy disease. It's actually a real human relationship.
That's right.
That where the roots are scored by the challenges and by fires. This is the relationship that grows into a gigantic redwood tree and really has strength and lives forever. I mean, you guys are great. So I like to play a game of this or that.
Oh, yay. I like games.
You know how this or that works? I'm going to say this or that, and I'm going to point to one of you, and you're going to answer which one you choose.
Okay.
And then I'll point to the other one, and then you'll answer it also. So you both get to answer every question. Okay, so if you had the choice to go back and meet your ancestors or go forward in time and meet your grandkids, which one would you do as adults?
Forward in time.
You want to meet your grandkids.
Well, let's be really clear that as fit as we are, we're going to be with our grandkids. So our great-grandkids.
Great. Let's make it very
Sounds
hard.
good.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
You would go forward.
Oh, yeah.
Forget those ancestors. Who cares about those?
I got that part.
Same for you, Hans?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Absolutely.
Second question, tall or skinny?
Or both.
You can't have both. That's the rule.
Tall
or skinny? Wait, Hans should answer first anyway because you already did.
Do I want tall or skinny?
Yeah.
Are we talking about a latte or?
I like her.
That is a good
I
workaround.
like her. I'd ask her out if I didn't know her. Wow. Tall or skinny? I'm going to go with skinny. It's so cliche.
And I'm going to go with tall because
Okay, well,
I'm with tall.
I know. I get it. Okay. And between the two, which would you choose? Enlightenment, complete total enlightenment, or $1 billion?
Oh,
Jesus,
that's so easy.
I've met some
Enlightenment
billionaires.
every day, all day.
Man.
Hello?
Me too.
Because with that, I can buy anything.
The number of messed up billionaires I've seen out there, I'm going to take enlightenment all day.
But
Dinner
there's
with Deep Rock.
There's that famous Indian enlightenment. I don't know any of those teachers, but one of them famously says, "If you're offered $1 million or enlightenment, choose the $1 million because you can't be enlightened anyway. There's no because no personality can be enlightened in that school of
That's funny.
thought." Okay, and the last question: if you could either live forever or die in the next 5 minutes, which one would you choose? You're either going to have to live, you're going to have to, no getting out of it, live forever, or die in the next 5 minutes.
Go, Hans.
No, it's the high five because we're both going to say the same thing.
Yeah, forever.
Live forever.
Yeah, forever.
As good as this is going, to be able to do this forever,
Easy.
as long as she says forever, I'm in.
And if she says die in the next 5 minutes,
I'm with her.
Let's go.
I'm with her,
whatever
absolutely.
she
Yeah.
says.
We'll be in the hereafter. Right?
That's so good.
Beautiful.
Well,
How
you guys,
fun.
yeah, that was fun. Thanks again for playing, and thanks for being on the show. And I look forward to seeing you guys a lot in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
Yes.
With me in the studio, as always, is my producer, Shar.
Hey.
Wow, am I glad I got back in touch with those two. They had so much to say. I mean, we could have gone.
There were so much little golden tickets and diamonds.
Yeah.
It's like they were just like dealing them.
Yeah, they were just tossing them off.
It's a couple that's just completely dialed in, you know?
And transparent.
Right.
And such strength of character. I
Right.
mean, think of the self-confidence that she had to have to forgive him for those infidelities
Right.
multiple times.
Right.
And the strength of character that he has to have to be able to say, yeah, I definitely did that. And to be responsible for the harmful impact that it had and still move forward in a relationship in a loving way and not beat himself up about it, and for her not to constantly
Well, to
beat
get
him up
past
about
that.
it.
I mean,
to get past it.
the percentage is so high of that, like, it's just like, that's it. It's done. And it's a trust thing, you know? It's like, you're never going to get that trust back.
Yeah.
And he made it, he said it perfectly. It's a gift that she's continued to give him,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
This was really cool, and they're awesome.
They exemplified the notion that infidelity is a symptom, not a cause. It's a symptom of something greater.
Right.
And so, if tragic though it may be, the process is always to delve into what's causing this thing to happen. What's the real cause
Right.
of this symptom? And those two embody that, and with this idea that permeates their entire relationship, which is that we're humans, and so the symptoms are going to manifest all the time, but they're not deal breakers because we're in this together.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that. Yeah, they're both just so deep. I mean, it's no surprise that they're both in the personal development field.
Exactly.
She's working with people, and he's working with people as an executive consultant. Speaking of which, if you'd like to get in touch with Hans or Desiree, you can find Hans at ontoco.com. That's ontoco.com. And you can find Desiree at glowpower.net. That's GLOW power.net. Well, that's it for today's show. Thanks for listening. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to us on iTunes. It makes a big difference. If you have any questions or comments, or if you would like to be on the show, please reach out to us via one of our social platforms. You can find our website at www.together.guide. Our Facebook page is Facebook/Together Show. Twitter and Instagram are both together_show, or you can email me at host@together.guide. Our producer is Charlene Goto. Our web designer is Courtney Munna. Our art director, and my one and only, is Aubrey Pick. She's the whole reason, folks. The song Disco con Tutti was provided by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. And a special thanks once again to our guests, Hans and Desiree Phillips. It was a great pleasure, guys. Now be sure to tune in for tomorrow's episode, in which you will hear...
You know, there's love and there's, you know, physical attraction and there's emotional attraction and there's intellectual attraction, but we're not blind. And I think it's a very human thing to think other people are attractive.
That's all for today. See you next time.